everyone, my name is Gabby and today I'm going to be bringing you my October wrap-up. So this month I've read 9 books, which is absolutely insane. For whatever reason, October always ends up being one of my more productive reading months, which makes no sense at all because usually like September and October are the months where I'm like hit the most with schoolwork and I'm the most busy and I have a lot going on. For whatever reason, from what I've noticed from the past few years that I've kept track of my reading progress, October is always a really productive month, which I don't mind at all because the more books I read, the better, and the more great books that I get to discuss with all of you. So I'm really excited to dive in and discuss all these amazing books with you guys. But just a brief thing that I want to mention. A lot of these books were featured in my fall October book haul, so I'm not going to be talking about their synopsises at all, just because I want to dive right into discussing all of my thoughts and opinions on the books and not have to spend a whole nother video talking about synopsises when I already did that in a past video. So if you want to find out synopsises and information about the books, I would go and check out my book haul just so you can get all of that information, so I'm not being really repetitive because that video was incredibly long, and so I want to be able to keep this video a little bit shorter and just strictly talk about my thoughts for these books. But the books that were not featured in my book haul will contain a brief synopsis and then I'll get into some of my thoughts. With that all out of the way, let's dive in and discuss all my reads for the month of October. So my first read of the month was Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. So this was the first full-length novel that I read in my AP Lang class. So normally I don't like to talk about books that I read for school on my channel just because I prefer to talk about novels that I've independently chosen to read and have not been forced to read in class. But what I've been noticing throughout this past year is that a lot of the books that I'm reading for school I actually really enjoy and would like to discuss on my channel, and I personally would like to believe that if I got the opportunity to pick up these books and I saw them in a bookstore and I had the option of picking them up, that I would, because I've enjoyed a lot of them that much and I think they're worth discussing on my channel because they're books that really aren't normally discussed on BookTube. So give you guys some new perspective and some new reads that aren't just the same really popular YA novels that everyone is talking about on BookTube. So Into the Wild is an investigative journalism piece that follows the life of Chris McCandless. What you find out when you go into the story is that Chris went into Alaska and a little over 100 days after camping out and foraging there, he ends up dying. So the question that Krakauer sort of ponders on throughout this piece is how did Chris die and why did he die? Because what you assume is that he was capable enough to survive, so whatever killed him was something that should not have been of his own fault. So it's sort of just this questioning of why is this person who seems perfectly capable of surviving this lifestyle die in a way that he did, and you sort of follow his family life and why he had some difficulties and why that may have led him to pursue some of the actions that he did, and having discussions with other people that he met along his journey because he went on several other little mini explorations before he went up to Alaska, and sort of following his journey until it led to this big whole adventure in Alaska, and the people that he met and how they impacted him, and talking about other explorers that have done similar things to Chris and sort of comparing them to Chris and sort of starting this whole discussion about this person's life and the decisions that they made, and sort of talking about some opinions that have been formed of this man and whether they're correct or incorrect, and really getting down to the bottom of this mystery. So this story was absolutely fantastic. I think one of the things that I really liked about it is that of course it is a real story and this is a real person that we're talking about. So it's interesting to actually get to sort of look on this event that happened that a lot of people really didn't know about and get to question it a little bit more. And also the thing is that because Chris is human, he's entirely relatable. He's not a fictional character, so you can see pieces of yourself or someone that you know within this work, and I think that that's just really exciting and really interesting. And there's so many fun things about this book that make it really unique to read because the writing style is just really easy and the book just flows. If I didn't have to read this on an assigned basis where it was like read X chapter this day and X chapter this day and this section's due this day, I would have probably thrown through this book in one sitting because I was just so captivated by it and so interested to see what was going to happen next and what happened to Chris and getting into his mindset, because the more that you go into the story, the more that you're just compelled to figure out what happened, because Krakauer holds it out until the very, very, very end, and it really leaves you wanting to read and keep turning every single page to find out what happened to this human being and why he made the decisions that he did and how his family impacted his life. And it's just so intriguing, and I had the best time reading this, and I'm glad that I got to read it in my AP Lang class. So who knew that reading books for school could actually be fun? Because for the most part, I have enjoyed books that I've read for school, but I have had times where they've turned me off a little bit, so I'm excited now that I'm reading books for school that I'm actually really enjoying. So my next read of the month is City of Lost Souls by Cassandra Clare. This is the 5th book in the Mortal Instruments series. So this is where I have left off currently in my TMI TID series reread. I have not picked up City of Heavenly Fire or Clockwork Princess, at the moment, but I'm definitely going to be finishing out my reread by the end of the year because I have 2 books left to get through, which is definitely manageable by the time that December comes around. So hopefully I will have this reread done by the end of the year. But I absolutely loved getting to dive into City of Lost Souls because this is the book that I feel like I forgot the most about, because with a series like this that's so big, it's so easy to cram all of the books together and just have one cohesive plot line in your mind rather than thinking about what happens in each individual book. So I was glad that I was able to reread this and freshen my mind, because this is going to be a lot of the content that the Shadowhunter show writers are going to be getting into, that in City of Fallen Angels. So I want to have my mind refreshed, because the more that I was reading these books, the more that I realized that the creators of the show sort of just took bits and pieces from the books and tried to sort of put them together and make things fit. Like, we have Azazel, who actually appears in City of Lost Souls. He is the one that is the memory demon and ends up taking each of the memories from the characters, and that was something that we saw in season 1, but then we see Azazel in season 2. Azazel isn't the memory demon anymore because that was already used in season 1. So we're like taking bits and pieces and putting things in there together, which I wouldn't have normally known had I not reread the series. So it's kind of given me a better appreciation for the show because I'm able to better analyze it and review it. Not only that, I'm able to read a series that I really, really love and get to read all these characters and the stories that are really close to me. So I'm of course having fun with this reread. I've been saying that every single month that I've been doing these wrap-ups and talking about these books. I'm glad that I'm finally getting the opportunity to do it and read a series that is really, really close to my heart, because I am absolutely enjoying it. And of course, all of Cassie's books are 5 stars for me because of just how close to my heart they are. My next read of the month was Language of Thorns, Midnight Tales and Dangerous Magic by Leigh Bardugo. So this is a collection of short stories that take place within the Grisha universe. Oh my god, did I absolutely love them. It was so interesting to see all of the origin stories that a lot of these characters could have possibly grown up with, and folktales and things that could have been passed along and that they grew up with, because they were just really compelling, and I never knew what was going to happen in the end of them, and they were just really dark and eerie and everything that I expected from Leigh Bardugo, and it was just the best to get to devour this book, especially with all of the beautiful illustrations throughout it. The fun thing about the illustrations is that they build up as you go into them, so you can have a story that starts out with no illustrations, and then by the time you get to the end it builds and it forms these really beautiful pictures at the end that you see completed when each story is finished, and it's really unique. I love the illustrators that were involved in putting this book together because it's absolutely gorgeous, and Leigh Bardugo has of course been gifted by the cover gods. Every single one of her books are amazing. I loved getting to read this. It was a story for me that I just flew through once I started reading it, but it also at the same time it wasn't something that I just went through in like a day or two. As I started reading each story, like the more that I wanted to turn the page and find out what happens next. But when I read short stories like this, I don't like to devour them all at once, just because you're reading like small little individual novels, and I want to be able to take each one in rather than just zooming through all of them and treating it like one full-length novel when it's technically several little mini novels, if you know what I'm saying. So I like to devour these in a nice and easy pace, but also then once I was going into these short stories, I would finish each one really quickly because I would just get so into it and so immersed in Leigh Bardugo's writing style. And I'm so glad that this book exists. We're getting more from the Grisha world. I love Leigh Bardugo's work within this realm because it's just so amazing and so eerie. I'm just so glad I got to be back in the world this month because it was like the perfect October spooky, thrilly, creepy read, and it was the best. So my next read of the month I do not actually have with me at the moment, and that is Little Monsters by Kara Thomas. So I did buy this book and read it this month, but I gave the copy to my friend because she went to a book event that Kara Thomas was going to be at that I was planning on going to, but then because I was in fall play, I was not able to attend. So she got the book signed for me and she now has it, and I have not been able to get it back from her yet. But I did read this book this month and I absolutely loved it. I read Kara Thomas's first book, The Darkest Corners, last year for my Halloween read, and when I found out that Little Monsters was coming out, I of course had to pick it up and read it this month. This book pretty much gave me a little bit of a Riverdale vibe. We follow our main character, Casey, and she has come to this new town. It's really small, there really isn't a lot that happens there, and so she ends up making 2 friends, Bailey and Jade, and the 3 of them sort of become a unit. But what she starts to notice is that Bailey and Jade end up becoming relatively distant when one of the biggest party of the year happens and Casey is not invited. She starts to sort of question things that are going on between her friendship with these 2 girls, and then that next morning Bailey ends up going missing, and so this whole story is a mystery as to, is Bailey alive, is she dead, what happened to her, and sort of really getting down into the grits of these teen girls and what's going on inside their head. And the really thing that I think is most interesting about this book is that none of the characters are really reliable. Each one of them is very shady and has a lot of creepy things going on, and you never really know who you can trust because each person has their own eerie background and you're guessing until the very end, and there's so much going on inside your head and you're just having to like fly through the book because you want to know what happens. Personally for me, I feel like this book was more complex than The Darkest Corners, but The Darkest Corners I personally think was more eerie, where like by the time I finished that I was breaking out in cold sweats and I was like freaking out and I felt like very, very shook. Whereas this book, I finished it and it was still like the same reaction of like, oh my god, but it felt like you're dealing with more of the complexities of the characters and what's going on inside their head, and it's more character focused and your problems are more internal, whereas The Darkest Corners is more of an external issue that the characters are having to confront. So it's two very different stories, but they both have the same impact, and it was interesting to get to read more from Kara Thomas because she has really genuinely gotten me into the horror thriller genre, because I would have not read books like that if it were not for me picking up The Darkest Corners last year, meeting her at YA Fandom Frenzy, getting that book signed, because I'm typically not the person that likes to pay to be scared. I just think that that's stupid. To read books like this and actually enjoy them was a big thing for me, and I'm glad that her books were able to get me into that. And so of course I am very, very excited every time a new book of hers comes out. She has another book coming out next summer called Cheerleaders that I am super pumped about, because if it's a Kara Thomas book and it has to do with cheerleaders, like I am sold, because it's gonna be dark and it's gonna be creepy and it's gonna be the best, and I'm so pumped about it. But I'm glad that I got to read this book this month because it was one that I very, very much enjoyed. The next read of the month was Last Seen Leaving by Caleb Rarig. So I got to meet Caleb at the Fierce Reads tour and I picked this book up. Oh my god, it was amazing. This is another contemporary horror thriller mystery book that kind of is a bit of a mind fuck, to be honest. There's so many crazy things that go on in this book, and I just could not believe my mind when I was reading it. This is one of those books that I feel like is so underhyped on BookTube and just in the book community in general. More people need to talk about this book. More people need to read it. It's fall. It's like the perfect season for these type of books. Guys, let's get on it and read Last Seen Leaving. Every single one of you, go and pick this book up. It's amazing. The thing that I think I loved about this book and I was most surprised about is how blunt the writing is, and the fact that it's just very direct. I don't know if I'm getting across the point that I'm trying to get across, so I want to read to you the first 3 words in Caleb Rarig's Twitter bio because it perfectly encompasses everything that I'm trying to say here. So reading from Caleb Rarig's Twitter bio, which is at McCaleb Rarig, I will link him down below because you should go and check him out because he's amazing. First 3 words in his Twitter bio: realistically foul-mouthed dialogue. So accurate, and I love that he like acknowledges it because it's just so legit real, but I appreciate it so much as a reader because a lot of authors just do not take that opportunity to be incredibly blunt, and I loved it not only because it was amusing but because it just felt genuine, because a lot of teenagers are just very blunt, so it felt like a very genuine characteristic of these characters and the way that they're going to behave, because teenagers just say the first things that come out of their mouth and really don't think about words to brain and like brain to words, like, you know, they don't think about that at all. That was like horrible way of communicating what I'm trying to say, but teenagers don't think before they speak. And so by writing that sort of really realistic foul-mouthed dialogue, it's realistic. That's what it is. It is perfect. And the characters themselves are also just very human and very genuine in the things that they're going through and the way that they're depicted. And the book is also diverse because we have a gay teen and we have a Muslim character, I believe. And the reason why I'm saying I believe is because the character's parents are Muslim, which I would assume would make the character Muslim. But again, you never know, so don't quote me on that. But if someone has read this book and would like to agree or disagree with that or fact check me, I would appreciate it. This book is amazing. There's twists, there's turn. I just was completely shook by the time that I finished it. I'm so glad that I picked it up. So thank you so much to Rachel, who works at Anderson's, for putting this book out there, getting me to read it, Caleb for coming to Anderson's so that I could get the opportunity to pick this book up, and for myself for reading the inside cover of this book and deciding to buy it because it was great. It was amazing. All of you should read this book. Next read of the month is another one that I'm really incredibly excited about, which is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. We have another John Green book, guys, and I am shook. So the last time that I've read a John Green book was like 4 years ago when The Fault in Our Stars came out. I read it a little bit before the movie was released, so it was out for about, I think, possibly a year or 2 before I went and picked it up, but it's been a while since I've read a John Green novel. So when Turtles All the Way Down was announced, I was of course incredibly hyped because I love John Green and his books, and I probably wouldn't be standing in front of you right now if it weren't for his books. So I was of course incredibly excited to get my hands on this, but I was also a little bit nervous because I was interested to see how he was going to follow up this book that just absolutely blew up. I think that this book is fantastic. think it's definitely within my top 3 favorite John Green novels, with The Fault in Our Stars, Paper Towns, and now Turtles All the Way Down. And the reason why, of course, Paper Towns and The Fault in Our Stars are up there is because they're just books that are really, really close to my heart, and the fact that they're a lot of the reason why I'm standing here. And Paper Towns was like one of the first things I talked about on my channel. To have a book that can come that close to those two, which are really, really close to my heart, definitely shows how fantastic John Green is as an author. I love this book because it's really personal to him, and the fact that he really talks about mental illness and what it's like to have these thought spirals. And I have them myself, except it's not in the same manner that Asa has them. I start to like take a test and I start to not know an answer and I start to freak out, and then my thought spiral goes to like, I'm gonna fail this test, to then I'm going to fail this class, to then I'm going to fail high school, to then I'm gonna be living in my mother's basement forever and I'm never gonna be able to get a job and I'll be a failure, and it starts to just keep going progressively further into the spiral of like my entire life is going to be ruined because I failed this one test. That sounds ridiculous, but it's something that happens to me because I pride myself so much on my grades. I really understood Asa and the things that she was going through, and how because she had these thought spirals, the more that they started to affect her health and cause her to think these things that aren't real. And seeing just the way that John Green writes that is so genuine, and with it being something that's really personal to him as he goes through OCD, as he has thought spirals, it was really beautiful to see that depicted on the page. And just everything about John Green's writing that I love, just these really random conversations, things that are really ridiculous that make it into the story just because they're humorous and they're beautiful and they sort of have nothing to do with anything that's going on, but they're still just John Green, and you expect that of his books, and the metaphors that you love so much and the beautiful lines. This was everything that I could have wanted out of a John Green book and more. John Green delivered. I got to read this amazing book, and I will be discussing with all of you. It is the Diversity Readers October pick of the month. We finally sort of got our stuff together because we were sort of figuring out what we were going to be doing this month. It was a busy month for me, but now we're back. We're going to be discussing this book the weekend of Thanksgiving, so that is Saturday, November 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern on my channel. Come and join us, discuss Turtles All the Way Down, read it with us. We're going to have lots of thoughts. It's going to be amazing, and I'm so pumped to get to discuss with all of you. My next read of the month was a semi-definitive list of worst nightmares by Crystal Sutherland. So this book has to deal a lot with mental health in the same way that Turtles All the Way Down deals with mental health, except this covers more of like anxiety and depression. Asa's character does have anxiety, but this story is more centered on that, whereas Turtles All the Way Down is more centered on OCD. I was really excited to read this book because I read Crystal Sutherland's other book, Our Chemical Hearts, last year, and I really enjoyed it because it was a very quirky contemporary that dealt with romance, whereas this book is more centered on mental illness in the way that affects people and families, particularly if they all suffer, and sort of understanding that and learning how to fix those things and learning to conquer your fears and take on things that may intimidate you. And it's a beautiful story, and I just felt like I got so much out of it, and I could really see Crystal grow as an author because she's dealing with subject matter that is a lot deeper in content, and the fact that it's not just romance that you're dealing with, but you're dealing with the actual human emotions that go on inside someone's head and the way that they think and the way that they process things. And it's just a really beautiful story, and I think that a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this book if they get a chance to pick it up. But it's also really fun. All the characters are really unique. You have your main character Esther, who wears all of these really sort of radical out there costumes that are very eccentric. That's the word that I was looking for, eccentric, that make her stand out a little bit. You have a character that really doesn't speak at all in signs. It's just very quirky in the way that I know that Crystal Sutherland books are, but it also deals with a lot deeper subject matter, so I just really enjoyed it for that, and I'm glad that I picked it up because it definitely surprised me. I was going into this book and I was excited to read it, but it definitely exceeded my expectations, and I'm glad that I picked it up because it was just a really, really phenomenal novel. 2 more books, you guys! The next one is another book that I read for school, which is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. So this book is very famous. It is the first book that sort of established the true crime genre. So this story is written like a novel, even though it deals with events that actually happened. Truman Capote, along with Harper Lee before she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, went to Holcomb, Kansas to investigate about the murder of this family called the Clutters. The husband, wife, and 2 younger children were all murdered in their house, and the question now is who did this and why did they do it, and sort of getting down to the bottom of this crime. And so Truman Capote tells this story that is written more like a novel, in which you sort of follow the killers and the things that they did throughout this process and why they did what we did, and sort of leading to what ended up happening with them getting captured and them ended up getting executed, and just sort of telling this entire story. And it's so interesting and so captivating. You're reading it and you're trying to get inside the head of these killers, and it's just so damn fascinating. I absolutely loved it. This was another book that I'm really glad I got to read for school because it was like the perfect Halloween thriller creepy read, because you're reading this book and you're realizing these are real human beings committing these acts, but you're just so dumbfounded by it because you would never think that a human being could do something this cruel and so gruesome. But the more that you read it, just the more that you're just mind blown by everything that goes on and the way that Capote was able to befriend these killers and tell these characters' story, and also almost in a way provide empathy for them because you see that they're real human beings, and it's just so fascinating. I had so much fun reading this, and there are adaptations of this book out there, some that just directly tell the story of the killers and others that follow Capote as he is telling the story, and I really want to get to watch some of those this month and get to find out more about them and be able to sort of see the differences between the book and the adaptations and sort of get to compare that a little bit, but I haven't watched any yet, but I definitely will soon. But I'm glad I got to pick up this book for school because I just absolutely enjoyed it and thought it was so compelling. And so my final read of the month was Moxie by Jen Mathieu. This is a book that I really loved just because I got so much emotional response out of it. There were points where I was smiling reading this, there's points where I was really angry reading this, there's points where I was crying, and I just really went through an emotional journey on this book, and I'm really glad that I got to pick it up because of that. This is a book that deals very strongly with feminism and being a feminist and what that means, and as a teen girl standing up for something that you think is important and sort of in a way starting your own little revolution and having just a group of girlfriends and like all banding together, and the story is just so much fun. But it's also really important because it's a moment where you're reading this and you're seeing all these things and this whole entire story is fictional, but it could be entirely realistic because these things happen in real world settings. I can't talk about other countries, but this is stuff that happens in United States high schools for sure. The way that guys behave and get favored over girls and the way that girls are targeted for their dress code and other things like that. And that made me really angry because these things happen. Girls in my high school have experienced this. I got dress coded because I was wearing a skirt for a drama club callback that was apparently too short, although it exactly met the dress code requirement, and I got a warning. There was a girl that was wearing a dress that was too short in my English class that had to go and walk around in her gym uniform, and she said it felt like doing a walk of shame, and she got a detention for standing up and saying that, no, I don't want to change, you didn't measure me at all, and my dress isn't that much of an issue, and because she stood up for herself, she got a detention because she was resisting authority. Things like that are completely unfair, but they happen in high schools all across the country and not just in my own, and I think that it's so important that this book targets that because it really gets you thinking, and I'm just really glad that I got to read this book and I got to have that experience and really acknowledge that because it's something that I wouldn't have thought about had I gotten the chance to actually read this book and have that moment of reflection. So that's about it for my October wrap up. My camera battery is about to die, so I should end this video here very quick. I do not have any movies or television shows or things that are like that I'm going to be talking about, so I'll probably do more of that in November and talk about the books I read and all the shows that I've been watching in October and November. I think that about wraps everything up. If you want to talk about your favorite read for October and let me know what that is, you can comment that down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with a new video. Goodbye!
Wildflowers don't care where they go.